Imagine this. Every 4 years, billions of dollars are spent, thousands of people work around the clock, and a nation comes to a standstill all for one day. That day is Election Day. But behind the curtain of glitzy campaign ads and dramatic debates lies a process that's far more complex than you might think. Did you know that in the 2020 US election, over 230,000 polling places were used and more than 158 million Americans cast their ballots? That's nearly 70% of the eligible voters in the country. Yet, despite the massive scale, the entire election process hinges on a few critical steps that ensure every vote counts and every voice is heard. In this video, we're peeling back the layers of the election process. We'll uncover the hidden world of election planning, dive into the strategies that campaigns use to sway voters, and demystify how polls and predictions shape what we think about the candidates. Plus, we'll explore the critical steps taken to protect the integrity of the vote and ensure everyone has a fair chance to participate. Stick around to find out how much goes into making sure your vote is counted, and what happens behind the scenes from the moment you cast your ballot until the final result is announced. Trust me, the journey from ballots to boxes is anything but ordinary. Chapter 1. Behind the Curtain, the Secret World of Election Planning. Ever wonder what it takes to pull off an election? It's like running a massive event with millions of guests, but everything needs to go perfectly. From the moment election dates are set, planning kicks into high gear. Teams work around the clock to secure polling places, hire staff, and manage logistics. For example, did you know that in the 2020 US election, over 230,000 polling places were used across the country? It's mind-boggling to think about all the moving parts involved. Election planning isn't just about securing locations and printing ballots. There's also a need to ensure that voting machines are in tip-top shape. In fact, election officials begin testing machines months in advance to avoid any mishaps on the big day. One interesting fact is that most voting machines are actually tested multiple times under various conditions to ensure they're foolproof. This testing is crucial because one faulty machine could delay an entire precinct's voting process. Behind every successful election, there's a team of unsung heroes, the election officers. These individuals are trained extensively, often undergoing 20 to 40 hours of training. It's their job to ensure that the voting process runs smoothly. And in larger elections, they often work 15-hour days, from the time polls open until the last ballot is counted. Then there's the tech side of things. The digital infrastructure of elections has to be both robust and secure. In 2016, the Department of Homeland Security designated election infrastructure as critical, highlighting its importance. With the rise of cyber threats, election officials have doubled down on security, implementing multiple layers of defense. This includes everything from encrypted communication channels to advanced monitoring systems that detect any unusual activity. Planning for an election is like a finely tuned orchestra. Every element must be in sync, from ensuring there's enough paper for ballots to making sure each polling station has a backup generator. It's no wonder some call it one of the most complex events a nation can organize. Chapter 2. The Game of Influence, How Campaign Strategies Shape Votes. Campaigns are more than just speeches and rallies. They're calculated strategies aimed at influencing voters. Data is at the heart of modern campaigns. In the 2012 US presidential election, Barack Obama's campaign reportedly had a database with information on 180 million Americans. That's a staggering amount of data used to tailor messages to individual voters. Campaigns use this data to create targeted ads, and yes, they know more about you than you might think. Did you search for information on climate change? You might see ads focused on environmental policies. Ever liked a political post on social media? That could determine which ads you're shown next. This micro-targeting has become so precise that campaigns can now deliver personalized messages to small, specific groups of voters, sometimes even to individuals. But it's not just about digital ads. Campaigns also rely heavily on grassroots efforts like door-to-door canvassing and phone banking. Studies show that face-to-face interactions can increase voter turnout by 7–10%. This is why you see so many volunteers knocking on doors, especially in swing states. Interestingly, The timing of campaign messages can be as important as the content. Research indicates that voters are more receptive to positive messages early in the campaign, but as election day nears, fear-based messaging becomes more effective. This explains the flood of attack ads you often see in the final weeks before an election. And let's not forget about debates. These events are meticulously planned to showcase a candidate's strengths while highlighting their opponent's weaknesses. A single, memorable line from a debate can shift public opinion. Remember the 1988 vice presidential debate when Senator Lloyd Bentsen famously told Dan Quayle, "Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy." That moment became one of the most quoted lines in debate history and had a significant impact on the public's perception of Quayle. At the end of the day, campaigns are all about perception. A well-crafted image, a clever slogan, or even a simple photo op can change the course of an election. As political strategist Lee Atwater once said, "Perception is reality." Campaigns live and die by this mantra. If this video's hitting the mark, subscribe now and let's keep the good times rolling. Chapter 3. Power in the Numbers. Decoding polls and predictions. Polling is both a science and an art. It's all about numbers, but those numbers are only as good as the methods used to gather them. For instance, did you know that in 1948, almost every major poll predicted Thomas Dewey would beat Harry Truman in the US presidential election? Truman's unexpected victory led to one of the most famous newspaper headlines, "Dewey defeats Truman." Polls rely on sampling a small group of people to represent the larger population. But getting a truly representative sample is tricky. Pollsters have to consider demographics, geography, and even the time of day when calling potential respondents. In fact, one of the biggest challenges in modern polling is reaching younger voters who are less likely to answer phone calls from unknown numbers. This is why many polling organizations have turned to online surveys, though these come with their own set of challenges. Another important aspect of polling is the margin of error. A poll might show candidate A leading by 3%, but if the margin of error is 4%, that lead isn't as solid as it seems. This is why you often hear analysts say that a race is too close to call. Polls can also influence voter behavior. This phenomenon is known as the bandwagon effect, where people are more likely to vote for a candidate who appears to be winning. Conversely, there's the underdog effect, where voters might rally behind a candidate who is trailing in the polls. Both effects show just how powerful polls can be, not just in predicting outcomes but in shaping them. However, polls aren't foolproof. In the 2016 US presidential election, many polls predicted a victory for Hillary Clinton. While she did win the popular vote, Donald Trump won the Electoral College, highlighting the complexities of polling in a country with such a unique electoral system. It's also worth noting that polling methods have evolved. Traditional phone polls are now being supplemented with data from social media, where sentiment analysis can provide real-time insights into public opinion. Yet with all these tools, polling remains an inexact science. As famed pollster George Gallup once said, "Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted." Chapter 4. Guardians of Democracy Ensuring Election Integrity. Election integrity is the backbone of democracy. Without trust in the process, the entire system can crumble. One of the most critical elements in ensuring election integrity is preventing fraud. While cases of widespread voter fraud are extremely rare, research from the Brennan Center for Justice found that the rate of voter fraud in the US is between 0.0003% and 0.0025%. The mere perception of fraud can undermine confidence in the outcome. Election officials use a variety of strategies to prevent fraud, from voter ID laws to signature verification. In some states, voter ID laws are strict, requiring a government-issued photo ID, while others are more lenient. According to a 2018 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research, strict voter ID laws do not significantly suppress voter turnout, but they do contribute to the perception of election security among voters. Another key aspect of election integrity is cybersecurity. With the increasing digitization of voting systems, the threat of cyber attacks has become a significant concern. The 2016 US election brought this issue to the forefront, with reports of Russian interference raising alarms. Since then, election officials have ramped up security measures, including using paper ballots as a backup to electronic systems. In fact, as of 2020, about 70% of American voters used some form of paper ballot, ensuring a verifiable paper trail. Transparency is another critical factor. Many election jurisdictions now use live streaming technology to broadcast the vote counting process. This not only deters fraud, but also reassures the public that the process is being conducted fairly. As former US President Jimmy Carter once said, "A fair and transparent process is essential to the legitimacy of any election." International observers also play a role in maintaining election integrity, especially in emerging democracies. Organizations like the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, send teams to monitor elections and provide unbiased assessments. Their presence can be a powerful deterrent to fraud and misconduct. But it's not just about preventing fraud, it's also about dealing with it when it happens. Swift and transparent investigations are crucial when allegations of fraud arise. In the 2004 Ukrainian presidential election, massive fraud led to widespread protests known as the Orange Revolution, and eventually a rerun of the election. This incident underscores the importance of having mechanisms in place to address electoral disputes. In the end, protecting election integrity requires vigilance at every level, from poll workers to cybersecurity experts. It's a collective effort that ensures the voice of the people is accurately heard and respected. Chapter 5, Voices Unheard, the Fight for Voter Access and Representation. Voting is a fundamental right, but not everyone has equal access to the ballot box. Throughout history, various groups have faced barriers to voting, whether due to race, gender, or socioeconomic status. The struggle for voter access is ongoing, and it's one of the most crucial battles in ensuring a truly representative democracy. One of the most significant challenges is voter suppression. Tactics like purging voter rolls, closing polling places in certain areas, and implementing strict voter ID laws can disproportionately affect minority communities. A 2019 study by the University of California, San Diego found that strict voter ID laws could reduce voter turnout among minorities by up to 2.6%. This highlights the need for vigilance in protecting the right to vote for all citizens. Gerrymandering, the practice of drawing electoral districts to favor one party, is another major issue. By manipulating district boundaries, politicians can essentially choose their voters, diluting the power of certain groups. The Supreme Court's 2019 ruling that federal courts have no role in deciding cases of partisan gerrymandering was a controversial decision, leaving the issue largely in the hands of state legislatures. Despite these challenges, there are ongoing efforts to expand voter access. Automatic voter registration, AVR, is one such measure that has gained traction. As of 2020, 19 states and Washington, D.C. have implemented AVR, which automatically registers eligible citizens to vote when they interact with certain government agencies unless they opt out. This has significantly increased voter registration rates in those states. Mail-in voting is another method that has been promoted to increase access, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. In the 2020 US election, nearly 46% of voters cast their ballots by mail, up from 21% in 2016. This shift not only made voting more accessible, but also safer for many during the pandemic. Efforts to increase voter access aren't limited to the US. In countries like Estonia, internet voting has been successfully implemented, allowing citizens to vote from anywhere in the world. Estonia's system, in place since 2005, has been used in multiple national elections and has been praised for its security and accessibility. However, technology alone isn't enough. Education and outreach are crucial in ensuring that people know their rights and how to exercise them. Organizations like the League of Women Voters and Rock the Vote have been instrumental in educating and mobilizing voters, especially among younger demographics. Representation is also about who gets to run for office. In recent years, there has been a push for more diverse candidates to reflect the demographics of the electorate. The 2018 U.S. midterm elections saw a record number of women and people of color elected to Congress, a trend that continued into 2020. As former First Lady Michelle Obama said, "Our democracy is vibrant and alive when everyone's voices are heard." The fight for voter access and representation is far from over, but each step forward brings us closer to a more inclusive and representative democracy. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for new videos every week.